Today we're cutting apart the most iconic mock toe in the entire world, the Redwing 877, to see if they're still worth it after 1,000-ish miles of wear, and we're gonna leave its fate up to the will of death. Now let's go over the boot information. So the brand is Redwing, the style is the 8-inch Classic Moc, the color is the Oro Legacy leather. They weigh 2 pounds 1 ounce each. They retail for $2.99 and they're made in the United States. Now let's go over the information that we can gather about the condition of this boot before we cut it in half. And if you want the full breakdown that goes through every single detail of this boot, go watch the brand new cut in half one we did last year. I'll put it in the cards in the description and everywhere. Starting with the leather, and this is a full grain chrome tan leather and it's the Oro Legacy leather. I almost thought it was a different leather when we first got these because it's darkened so much and it's so much more red than the Oro leather starts out as. Look at the difference between these two. It's crazy how much different it looks. And this is one of my favorite leathers that you can get in any boot because it's so bright and it's such a unique and iconic leather that Redwing does. And now I like it even more because of how cool it looks once you've really started to break these in. It's about 2.5 to 2.7 millimeters thick. As for the condition of it and how it's held up, I think it's held up pretty well because you've got some pretty heavy splitting and cracking and a few holes here, but the upper portion of the boot is still in really good condition. It doesn't seem like it's worn prematurely because if you remember in the last video, I had some concerns about the bluing on the inside and it not being as high quality of a leather. It looks like it's just about as durable as any leather we've seen in this worn out series we're doing. And obviously on the outside here, you can see where it's creased and worn through, but there is a lining underneath. But it's nearing the end of its life cycle for this portion of the boot because of how deep these grooves are and how much it's starting to split and crack. Also, if you look at the toe, it's worn through at the toe because the guy that owned these was an iron worker, and anytime you see this on the toe, it's because whoever was wearing them was kneeling on their knees a lot and it wears out that spot on the toe. So that's why a lot of people like the toe cap on the work boot because it's just so easy to wear through that if you're kneeling a lot. And speaking of that lining underneath, this boot is lined in a unique way because there's no lining on the quarters of the boot, basically from here up, but all down here on this 2-inch strip that makes up the vamp and whatever you would call this area is reinforced with a leather lining. And I don't really know how thick it is, but I like that because if you look at this boot, there's so much wear on this bottom portion of the boot that it's really nice to have that leather lining behind it to reinforce it. Because that's where you see the most wear on a boot is that lower 2 to 3 inches. And if this lining was fabric, once you wore through that, you would basically be exposing your foot. Because like on the Thorogoods and the Carolinas, it's just those cotton linings that are not gonna protect you in any way compared to a leather lining. Next to the construction, so this is a Goodyear welted boot that features a full leather welt. And this is the perfect evidence as to why I prefer the leather welt instead of the plastic welts that you see in the Thorogoods and the Carolinas, because there's no splits in here anywhere. And I think these have been resold at least once, because if you look at the condition of the outsole compared to the upper, it looks like the upper is way more worn than the outsole. And the stitching is so close to the edge of the welt, it looks like it's been sanded a little bit tighter. And you can still see the little striations. So I think it's been resold at least once. Then moving to the inside of the boot, you can see that super thick veg tan leather insole that's around 4 to 5 millimeters thick. It's the thickest insole that we've seen in mock toes thus far. And it's crazy how dark that leather's gotten from use and wear. And if you put your hand in here, you can feel his footprint for every single toe has made an indent into that insole. These really thick insoles in the Redwings take forever to break in, but they give you so much material to be able to compress to give you that perfect footprint. And I can feel that there's some cracking in the insole, so I'm really curious when we get these cut in half if those cracks run all the way through that thick piece of leather or if it's just surface cracks. And then next to the outsole, so this is basically Redwing's version of the Vibram Christie outsole. It's just a soft, I believe, rubber-based outsole, and it seems like it's holding up pretty well. They always have this issue where you wear the heels out faster than anything else, no matter what. And that's usually the reason why they need to be resoled, is not because they've evenly worn across, it's usually right at the heel. But as for the stitching and the overall construction, the boot's still in really good shape. And I would say you're at least gonna get the rest of this outsole's worth of wear. But because of these big splits, I'm not sure if it's something that I would resole one more time, especially with that huge hole there and the hole in the toe. But I guess we'll see once we actually get it cut in half. And that leads us to my favorite part. Let's decide the fate of this most iconic mock toe by spinning the wheel of death. Well, now the entire shop smells like burning flesh, and I smell like burning flesh. My arms and everything smells like burning flesh. But we had to use the bandsaw to get through the outsole. We couldn't quite get through the laser, but let's see what's inside. So it really surprised me how dark this insole is, not just on the surface, because look at how much darker it is from the brand new one, but it's dark all the way through. And I think that's just from years of use and sweat, just slowly aging and darkening that leather. The thing I love about this is you can literally see that his footprint in here. You know, and that's why people find these types of boots so comfortable, because it's like when you were a kid and you put your hand in wet cement.
Go. Force it in as deep as you can.
That's what's happening with these boots over time. You get that perfect imprint that contours your foot perfectly, and it makes it significantly more comfortable than if it was just a flat sheet. And you can see that there are quite a few cracks in the surface of the leather, but if you look at the cross section, none of those cracks even go further than the first half of a millimeter of leather. So that was kind of a concern of mine when I felt in here, is how deep are those cracks? Do these really hard, thick leather counters slowly fracture over time? But at least from this boot, it doesn't seem like there's any evidence to suggest that. And you can also really see on this side how much this guy's foot bulged out the side of this boot. And that's why it's really important to make sure you get the right width of boot, because like we talked about in the Thursday video, that little rib in the Goodyear welt causes a ridge all the way around the insole. And so if you're standing on that all day, every day, it just can't be comfortable. And then probably my favorite thing of this boot is this is by far the tiniest little counter I've ever seen in my entire life. If I pull both of these pieces out, this counter is only an inch wide, which I don't think it necessarily needs to be anything more than that, because you've got several layers of leather acting as the counter, because you've got the backstay, the upper leather, and then the lining leather, and then also this counter cover, I guess is what you'd call it. And they're all leather, so that itself is, let's see how thick it is actually, like 9 millimeters thick. So it doesn't need a super big counter. I don't even know why they put this in here. And then I also take back my previous statement about these not being able to be resold one more time, because I didn't remember how thick this lining leather is, because this lining leather is as thick as some of the other Moc Toe's upper leather we cut in half. So if you don't mind these slowly just falling apart and big chunks of leather falling off, you could probably get one more resole out of these just fine, and they'd be just as comfortable. They just won't look as good. And I also forgot that these boots don't have a shank. I thought for sure there was a shank in this boot, because they are kind of a work heritage boot. So that's definitely something to keep in mind if you're wanting these boots specifically for work. So now the question is, are these Redwing Moc Toe boots still worth it after 1,000 miles of wear? I think the best way to decide that is to find a boot that's similar quality and a similar price and compare the two, like the White's Perry Moc Toe. And these boots are nearly identical in the construction and the thicknesses of everything. The biggest differences are the Redwings have a thicker insole, which give you a little bit more contouring, but is harder to break in. The Redwings have a better lining leather, which is going to give you more durability but less breathability. But the Redwings don't have a shank like the Perry Moc Toes do. And the White's Moc Toes are $30 less. So looking at those two and comparing the two, the Redwing is a slightly better boot in my opinion, but it is slightly more money. So I think that price point does justify it, but I still think you're paying just a little bit extra for that Redwing name. And some people are okay with that, because these are the most iconic Moc Toes in the world. These are the boots that when you're wanting to buy a Moc Toe, most people are looking for the Redwings. And some people are okay with paying just a little bit of extra to get that brand name. And I'm kind of a sucker for brand names. So for me, I would have no issues buying these boots. And let me know what you guys think and what your experiences are with these boots. And Mocktober rolls on. Next week's gonna be crazy. We're already like way off the schedule, so I apologize for not sticking to our schedule. But if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing, because that's the best way to not miss another upload. And thank you guys for everything you do. Mocktober is my favorite month for this channel because it's so much fun. We could play with lasers and chainsaws and everything, so thank you guys. See ya.